Right? I've hired psychopaths and I've hired like A players. Like frustrating. I thought I was very good at hiring. And that was one of the benefits of working for these big organizations. They have very, very sophisticated hiring processes. Fairmont is where I learned about different people have the innate ability to do different things well. So if you think fast on your feet, I want you at the front desk or in concierge. I don't want you cleaning rooms. If you're the type of person who's OCD and everything has to be in the right space and the lamp has to be here and the little clock radio has to be here, I want you cleaning rooms because you have exactly the right attributes. And they actually got the Gallup organization to create a specific questionnaire and hiring process so that we always put the right type of person in the right type of role because it's very difficult to change personality. And in my book, my biggest section is actually on the hiring people. And I have an 11-step process where I delve in.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Hey entrepreneurs, today we're sitting down with Jeff Roussel. He's the CEO and founder of Oakridge Group, which we're going to get into in more detail. But Jeff, we have to start here. You're a first-time guest on the Entrepreneurs United podcast after 4 seasons that's been a DJ at Club Med. How did that come to be? And tell me about that experience before we get into the business stuff. Give us something really juicy here.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories at Club Med that we will not be sharing on this store on any public venue whatsoever. But interesting thing was, I'll tell you how I became a DJ. So my dad was in the Army. So when I grew up, we didn't have any money. We moved around every 3 years. And so when we went to when I finally got into college, it was all scholarships and it was into law school. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer. And probably after my first year, I'm walking by. Back in the day, they had these things called travel agents. So you actually didn't go on the internet to book your airfare. You went to the store and you went in there. And on the store, they actually had these brochures of a beautiful beach in the Bahamas. And it was Club Med. And I'm like, you know what? That's where I want to go. And so to get myself through school, I was always a hustler. I DJ'd at night. So I was making back in the 80s like $200-300 a night, which was a lot of money back then for someone who's 18, 19 years old. And so I throw in my mixtape, sent it to New York, and before you knew it, I dropped out of law school and was a DJ at Club Med. And it was the best decision I ever made. It made such an impact and things that I do today, which you never saw coming. So I made my parents very proud.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, you wrote a book, Fire Yourself First. When's the last time you fired yourself and how did you follow those principles?
Yeah, that almost it's quite often I have to do that because as like a wired entrepreneur, I see opportunities everywhere. And so I've gotten really good at being able to see and identify an opportunity, quickly evaluate, is this where I want to go? And I have criteria that I go through in my head to see, is this worth it? I see so many opportunities. I have to be very firm in what it is. So if it won't create a certain profit margin of a certain revenue and help a certain amount of people, it just doesn't excite me and I'm just moving on. And so as soon as I get those ideas down, I have a team, we discuss it, and then boom, I move it to the next person. I just like to create the ideas, create the opportunities, and move. And it could be a joint venture, it could be a collaboration, or it could be a new business that's starting up. And so, in order to just control myself, so I created Fire Yourself First and fired myself from 5 of my businesses just to keep balance. It's more of a mindset because we can fill 80 hours a week easy. There's not a challenge. And so I need to really put some rails, like when you're doing bowling and you're not very good and they put those guide rails up on the side. That's what I have is it's okay. You only have 10 hours, 10 days a month. So what aren't you going to do if you're going to take this on? And so that really helped me out a lot. And then as a side benefit, I actually increased the valuation of my companies because now I'm not a key part of it. I can walk away. The businesses run themselves. I go in and do only what I love to do, which may be strategize, ideation. And I love team building and building a great team as well. And so that's what I do now.
Yeah, I love that. And so to bring that back to our listeners, what you do now with Oakridge Group is it's a holding company slash family office of investments you've made, companies you've either incubated or bought or invested into that are now part of your organization. I think there's about six of them. Is that correct?
Yeah, 5 now. I just exited one.
Okay, perfect. And what you've been able to do, and I love this concept of fire yourself first. We talk about it often on this podcast, but I wrote a book recently called The $100 Million Journey. And there's 7 principles of entrepreneurial success. Number 7 is move from CEO to chairperson. It's move yourself operationally out of the business, just like fire yourself first. It's kind of like, it's very similar as one of those
Yep.
principles. So I really connect with that. And I also have a holding company myself with 5 businesses in it, ironically, exactly the same number today. So that's what I was saying before we recorded. We have a lot in common as it relates to that particular connection point. It wasn't the DJing, but Jeff, if we think about how you started as an entrepreneur, so my guess is you always had this ability to see and seize opportunities. You kind of had that innate ability, I'm assuming, from your education and growth and being entrepreneurial and being a serial entrepreneur, and you can kind of see things and you develop this criteria. But how did you at some point realize maybe I shouldn't be operating this business? I should fire myself. When was that first time where it hit you? Yeah, I got to fire myself.
This is how, because I grew up in an army family, I didn't have any entrepreneurs. So I didn't know anything about starting a business. I didn't know anything about being an entrepreneur. I hustled when I was young. Sure, I had the paper route. I was painting, whitewashing fences. I was doing lawns. I have a good work ethic, which I did learn from my father. Being in the army, you have a good work ethic. And so I guess I did do a little bit of that when I was younger. And it wasn't really until I had started my first business. So after the DJing at Club Med, I went back and I actually went to college and I got a degree in computer science because computer science was easy for me. So it wasn't a challenge. I just think that way, coding, if then this, if this else, if this situation, and that coding and that thought process made me like I did not have to work. Dean's List, graduated with honors, and it was like, wow, this is like I was just doing what I naturally love. Went to work for a big corporation, Xerox, because at the time, Xerox and IBM, those were the big ones because I didn't know how to start my own business. So I'm like, I'm going to work for the best people there is. And Xerox invented the personal computer, the GUI, which is the Macintosh. They invented the mouse. Like Xerox was way ahead of its time. Where is it today? I don't know what they do. So it's interesting how things challenge, but I always was quite fascinated with innovation and thinking outside the box. And so I did corporate America for probably 10 years. And then I always, after 3 to 4 years, I would get laid off and they give me a boatload of money because I was always a good employee. So I would usually get a year's salary and then they give me career counseling. One time they gave me the career counseling and they actually came back and said, Jeff, you actually shouldn't work for anyone else. You need to do your own business. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, how is that? And so I'm like, I need guide. And they're like, you can either go the franchise journey or you can do a business opportunity where you learn a business. So my first business was equipment leasing broker. And so I paid $25,000. I went to St. Louis, learned how to be a leasing broker, and went and just grinded it out. And from that, turned into the family office today. And
Okay.
so what I do is I always look for the money and I always listen to my customers. And so when my customers are saying, hey, we want this, I look and evaluate. If you're ready to pay for it, then I'm ready to offer it for you. You'll see a common thread through all of my businesses. They feed on each other, except my real estate investing. And that's a bit just another segmentation that's a bit individual, but
Okay.
the businesses are all, they're not complete pivots. So I started financing equipment. I soon learned if I did medical equipment, doctors just had to sign their name. They get $250,000 and I got paid fast. I'm like, okay, easy money is good money. So I specialized just in financing physicians, private, which turned into private hospitals, surgical centers, cosmetic clinics. Then those same doctors are asking me, now that I have these cosmetic lasers, what do I do with them? And I'm like, I'm not a doctor. How would I know? But I helped a lot of doctors over the last few years create cosmetic clinics. So
Yep.
why don't you go talk to them?
I'm just
Yeah,
curious, in that leasing company, which was the first company you started, how long did you run that business until you realized, I got to fire myself first here and move myself on so I could do other ventures?
I'm a slow learner sometimes, and I like to do everything myself, but I always valued a team. And so I would say that business was probably 3 years in before I really didn't do much at that time. The team was in place. It was my first business, so it took me a lot longer than it would usually. Where the real, and so I was active in all of my businesses. And I would say even 3 years ago, I would work probably 60 hours a week. That was my thing on my five businesses. Then somebody offered me 10 million for one of them, and it was a fair valuation. And I'm like, I was always taught you build the business and then you sell it. Okay, that's the path, right? I didn't know any different. I was a member of Vistage and EO and these type of groups, and everybody's there. You grind it and then you build it and then you sell it. And when I was offered the 10 million, I'm like, okay, so that's a good amount of money. So I could, it's nice walking around money. And what would I do? And I'm like, I realized at that point, I love that business. So why would I get rid of it? Because I'm supposed to sell it because it's successful, it hits the right valuation over and above the right valuation. And I just thought, no, I'm keeping it. But I'm going to double down and automate it totally. That is when I said, you know what? 10 days a month. That was the goal.
Mm.
And it took me maybe 3 or 4 months. You start at 25 days a month and then 20. And just like anything, it wasn't cold turkey. I'm going to 10 days. That would have been a disaster. Because one of the things you need to know, especially if you're operating multiple businesses, you need to know the key numbers that drive your business, forward thinking as well as currently. And so sometimes it takes time to get those KPIs, which I call them, and some people call them OKRs. I have this dashboard where all my key numbers are. And so sometimes it takes you some time to develop those numbers. And the other thing is sometimes your existing team is not the right team that you need to fire yourself and operate and grow the business without you. Because this is critical. If I walk away from the business and I'm only doing 2, 3 hours a month in any of my businesses, then it really needs to be operationally succinct, but it also needs to have the right people in place that are thinking growth, right? Where 1 plus 1 equals 5, 1 plus 1 equals 10. They need to have that mindset. And that's why when I wrote, I'm always a simplifier. I like to simplify everything. It could be 400 moving parts. That's fine. Four. That's what we're going to go down to. And so that's the first thing that I thought of. First of all, you got to know where you're going. What's your personal why? And it has to be way bigger than the business, way bigger. So if I sold that business for 10 million, what would be my why? What would get me up at in the morning? If I don't know that, then you better figure it out before you sell anything or exit anything. You need to know where you're going. And then hiring the right people. You have to hire a specific type of person that if you want the business to run without you. And then remember this, the benefit of having the business run without you is you can increase your valuation 2 to 3 times what your business would be worth before it was fully automated. So very important. And then the dashboard scorecards let you sleep at night. So I need to know my 3 or 4 KPIs. So when I turn 50, I'm like, okay, it was fun. In the 30s, I could handle 10 things on my list. Now I handle 3 to 4. That's it. So I can't handle any more than 3 or 4 key numbers. And so it's very important to find the domino that is the most important number that affects everything else. And so for one of my businesses, it's consumer focused. Our number one criteria is the number of 5-star reviews we get. Because for every zero point 0.1 off of 4.9 costs us probably $20,000 to $40,000 a month in lost revenue. So if we're 4.3, That's $150,000 a month in lost revenue. So we need to, our goal is 4.8 to 4.9. Yeah, if we drop down to 4.7, that's good. Because I know if that one key metric is in place, that means we're doing good work. Our patients are, our customers are telling other people, and we're growing.
You said there was one specific type of person if you want your business to run in your absence. Can you describe the characteristics of that specific type of person, and how would an entrepreneur go about finding and vetting that person?
Number one most difficult job in any business is hiring people. I've hired psychopaths and I've hired like A players. So it gets frustrating. I thought I was very good at hiring, and that was one of the benefits of working for these big organizations. They have very, very sophisticated hiring processes. I also work for Fairmont Hotels as well. So that DJ gig in Club Med in the 80s got me director at Fairmont Hotels because I had hotel experience. Plus, I had IT and communication and that type of experience as well. Fairmont is where I learned about different people have the innate ability to do different things well. So if you think fast on your feet, I want you at the front desk or in concierge. I don't want you cleaning rooms. If you're the type of person who's OCD and everything has to be in the right space and the lamp has to be here and the little clock radio has to be here, I want you cleaning rooms because you have exactly the right attributes. And they actually got the Gallup organization to create a specific questionnaire and hiring process so that we always put the right type of person in the right type of role, because it's very difficult to change personality. And in my book, my biggest section is actually on the hiring people. And I have an 11-step process where I delve in. And if any of your listeners want to get that exact 11-step process, you just go to the book's website, which is fireyourselffirst.com, and just scroll to the bottom and say, give me the free download. I want that guide, and you can have it. It's very difficult. And here's the key to if you want to have a team that runs the business without you, probably better than you are. I'll tell you, my businesses that I've let go make more money than they did when I was there. I just wish I did it earlier. That was my regret. And what's the secret to hiring the right person? They need to have a growth mindset, a learner's mindset. One of the initial questions I ask is, what have you done to improve your knowledge in the last year? If they've done nothing on their own, I won't hire them. Even if they work for the right person, they have all the experience, that lack of mindset, I want someone who just is naturally wants to learn things. Because when things don't go well and you're not there, they need to know how to figure it out for themselves. A natural learner will do that because that just comes natural to them. We just hired a multimedia designer, and this person actually used to work in the school system and decided she wanted to do this career change. She went to school, paid for it herself, took courses it herself, and then created all the portfolio and then got a good kind of entry level job. I'm like, that's the person I want because I know I don't have to ask her. And she is amazing. I don't have to ask her anything. She knows AI. Like when I was hiring for this, so many people wanted to just do the same thing that has always been done. ChatGPT should be part of your workflow every single day, especially if you're in marketing and design. You can get a lot of great information, and then you'll take that and then you'll create the custom piece that's unique to you and your business.
It sounded like you had a Gallup assessment and looking at people's innate abilities. Is that something that's publicly available?
No, I just figured it out for myself. And it's on
Okay.
the 11th step. All the questions I ask, I've done that because I look for, you can't hire personality and work ethic. You can hire for skills. So if they have the ability to learn, then I can teach them. So that 11 steps, you have to wear people down because the pathological liars and manipulators, they're very good at manipulating a hiring process. So you need to wear them down. So usually by the fourth or fifth step, I've got them where they'll slip up and I'm like, aha, people say hire slowly. Take that seriously. Sure, I could use someone tomorrow, but I'll take 6 months to hire someone. And there's plenty of people now. There's a lot of great people. I don't know why people say, oh, there's not good people. I don't find that at all. The hard workers, type A personalities, they're there. And so many of them are in jobs where the culture's not good. So if you have a great culture, you can snap these people up easily. And look for industries that don't overpay. Am I paying for a Silicon Valley systems engineer? God, no. I'll hire someone from rural Iowa who is really good, self learned, created all this stuff, and is a fraction of the price and is a better worker.
So it sounds like you look for a growth mindset and a learner's mindset, and those are on the plus side, if you will. What are the deal breakers as you see them?
Blamers, always
So
someone
someone who
else's
does not
fault.
have introspection, that they don't take responsibility.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's one of the things. I want to see how perceptive they are. And is it in their covering letter? It's quite funny. You hear, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. It's not like you are looking for someone who can do this. That's how you need to word it to me. As the hiring person, like, show me that you care about me, not that it's I. I think that's a challenge, right? That you have to look for. I look for people who, and this is tough for some of these millennials who I often hire, is I want longevity. It's actually very rare someone work 2, 3 years in a job. So it's just quite, so I look at if you've skipped around 3 or 4 jobs in 2 years, nope, you're not for me. Because like, why did you change around? So obviously you can't make a decision or you're not very good at making decisions. So if you can't make a decision there, why would you be good for me?
Got it. So on
And
the
what,
plus side, we got growth mindset, learner mindset. On the deal breakers, we have low introspection and low longevity in the past. I'm curious with your particular talent of enjoying finding patterns and you think like coding. When you said of things you like to do, you said strategize, idealize, and team building. What are the patterns as it relates to team building that you see?
you have, and this is one of the challenges, you have to have gone into business, started your business for the right reason. That's to help people. I never started my leasing company 20 years ago to make money, right? And be wealthy and buy a plane. I know people that do. Those just aren't things that are interesting to me. However, when you help people and solve their problems, there is no reason you shouldn't charge for it and get paid for it. So if your primary reason for going into business is to help people with what you know and what's unique about you, then the money will follow. So that's a very important distinction. So if I can't provide value, so if I can't help someone and provide value to them in a unique way, then I won't do it. If I can, then I think, how can I package this to make the most profit? I'm all about the profit, don't care about revenue. I sit on boards of people, they have 100 million, $800 million businesses, and they have a 3 to 5% profit margin. I make more than that $800 million business does in most of my businesses, and most of them are doing 10 to 20 million. Like, I just make way more profit because I make 20, 30%. So I'd rather make 20, 30% on 10 million than 3% on 100 million. It's just a lot more, less moving parts. It's easier to do that. So provide value, number one. If you're not providing value, then think about that. And when you are providing and solving a problem, then what else do they want? What goes with that? And you have to package something so it's unique to you. You just don't want to be a commodity, right? And that's very important as well. So maybe you package a service offering when they purchase something, or you have an annual renewal. So always think, depending on your business, how you want to package things together and put things together.
Got it. Can you expand on the team building piece of it? So I have that formula that you gave, those 4 steps. What I didn't hear was the patterns that you see related to specifically building high performance teams.
So the key is you have to hire the right people for the right reason. If they want a job, a job, they're not the right person for me. If you have a smaller entrepreneurial business, they have to be excited about that as well. Another hiring criteria that's interesting is that I want to know how they grew up. People who grew up in a restaurant family or in a family, maybe their parents own the neighborhood store or something, an entrepreneurial family, those are the best hires for an entrepreneurial business owner because they get the stress, they get the grind, they understand it. And even a farm, you grew up in a farm work ethic, right? So I look for that. So when you have those type of people, they're very positive. And one thing you have to do as the leader's responsibility to set them up for success and tell them what winning looks like and what the expectations are. So, of course, we have a very positive, we have a very nurturing culture, but we don't have foosball tables, we don't have meditation chambers and all that. If you want to do that's fine, you can do that. I encourage those type of things, but you're here to work. Also have fun as well. So we don't take ourselves too seriously. On our meetings, it's always how did we help a customer this week? Who did we help? So I always remind them we're here to help our target ideal customer. So you may get very specific on that. I don't like to do dollar amounts. So the goals are number of widgets sold, the number of widgets delivered. Whatever your metric is, I convert that to dollars because I know the average sale is X amount of money. So I do that for myself, but for the team, they don't need to know. We did $180,000 in revenue in this segment last month. That doesn't impact them. But if we helped 80 people, that impacts them. They're like, they understand, oh, okay, I'm helping 80 people. Put a face to what we're selling. It's not a commodity. We're making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
I pay above average, right? Because I need someone who wants to work above average. If you're doing 9 to 5, you're not the right person for me. Our official hours are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Sometimes people work on weekends and work on evenings because if we need to help somebody or help the customer, no one hesitates to do that. Our time off, you can take all the time off you want.
So, Jeff, what's the total headcount in the 5 companies? How many people do you have in your organization? Because to your point on the business size, you don't need your business sizes to be big in order
No,
for it to be profitable. And by the way, I say the same thing. I'd rather own a $10 million, 100% of a $10 million company than 10% of a $100 million company. Similar
yeah,
language, but how many people do you have in your businesses?
60,
Okay. And in the largest business, there would be how many? 20, 30? You probably have a couple
30,
different sizes, 30.
yeah,
So
30.
when Rich asked you about team building, you were talking about the characteristics of the individual and the bonus programs. But you did mention in there, we like to have fun or we like to do team, but you didn't really tell us, how do you build a culture? You talked about culture. So forget about the individual. Think about a group of 30 now. How do
Yeah.
you, as you have multiple companies, help that company strategically that has the 30 employees as an example, build a positive team culture, have fun, but also be focused on the metrics? What are the things that you've done that you've experienced success with to build that team culture successfully?
Absolutely. And it happens over years, right? But what I like to do is at least once a year, let's learn. So all my people want to learn. So they love anytime we get a chance to learn anything. And you know what? I found them quite fascinating. And I think this is the high performers love to do assessments. Different types of assessments. And I'm not talking about Myers Briggs, which I've done, but I like to have very practical ones and ones that help everyone. So one assessment everybody's does is the Kolbe, and it's Kolbe, and it's in my book, Fire Yourself First. So I have a couple, and DISC is another one as well. Kolbe shows me what a person's innate mo is, what they would do if they weren't stressed, they weren't forced, their natural what it is. And it's nice that everybody knows everyone else's because that way they understand each other. So all of a sudden you have this understanding. Is there one assessment that is perfect for everyone. No, not at all. You need to have three or four. Colby, for example, I'm a high fact finder and I'm a high quick start. High quick start is very normal in entrepreneurs because we see a thing, we execute, we just do it. We don't think about it over and over again. My EA is a high fact finder and a very low quick start. That's her job. You have to be detail oriented, that you look at make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed. So for her, I don't want a quick start because that's me. And so depending on the person, we need to know how they operate so we know if we're pushing someone out of their comfort zone.
Gotcha.
Another one, which is very surprising, and teams love this, is you've heard Love Languages by Gary Chapman. He has workplace appreciation assessment. And so it's basically adjusting love languages that you use for personal and making it the work love language. It's the work language.
Okay.
And so this is how people like to be rewarded, right? So it's nice to know that all of my team, actually, it's very interesting, are all words of affirmation. So I know that's how I reward them. I once had a salesperson, his number one was gifts. So it's okay. That makes sense. And so me saying, you did an amazing job. I thought that was fantastic. I loved how you did this and this, and keep doing it. That wouldn't actually get him motivated. He needs stuff. So I go on Amazon, I send him something that he's interested in.
Yeah.
I also, when I start people off, I ask them about a dozen questions. What's your favorite store? What's your favorite coffee? What's your favorite drink? What's your favorite restaurant? What's your favorite book? Who's your favorite author? And so then I know, oh, they love Starbucks, so I may give them a $50 Starbucks gift card. If they said they love McDonald's, then the $50 Starbucks card is not very authentic,
Yeah.
right? So quick, easy ways to do.
So to sum this up, I can't wait to look at the 11-step process, and you can find that at fireyourselffirst.com, because I think a lot of what we've talked about here ultimately comes down to the way you answered the question originally, which is finding the right person is the hardest thing to do. But it's also, if you can get that secret covered, you'll bring on the right people, you can put them in the right roles, you can learn more about them, you can learn how everybody communicates together. That will create the proper team, that will create the proper culture. It all stems from that. Go to fireyourselffirst.com, get the 11-step process. You can download it there. Jeff, thank you very much for your time and joining us today on the Entrepreneurs United podcast.
Thank you. It was an honor being on here, guys.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
John, I had, for me, what was a literal mind-blowing epiphany over the course of that conversation.
Tell me about it.
When he talks about, in meetings, they talk about how did they help, and what they talk about is a number of people helped and not the revenue. As the owner, he knows if you help X number of people times X is your average job size, yeah, of course it's that amount of revenue. But the people don't get fired up about the revenue. The people get fired up about helping others.
Yeah.
And at CertaPro, we for years had talked about hitting $1 billion. And we believe that we're going to hit that over the course of the next couple of years. So now we're looking at $2 and $2.5 billion. When we have talked about the dollar amount, we find franchise owners are relatively disengaged from any enthusiasm about the dollar amount. I am wondering, based on this conversation, for the first time ever, I'm thinking about it going, should we be talking about the number of families helped to beautify their home? And would people get behind that way better than they would a dollar amount that the overall corporation is achieving that isn't as meaningful to them themselves? And we talk about cut a piece of the overall company's vision off, and what's your vision? When we talk about that, we're encouraging them to do that in the form of a dollar amount. Wouldn't it be way more inspiring for people to think about how many families do you want to help? So we're going to help X number of families. What's your number? Man, I have never even considered that as an opportunity on how to build a team until this conversation. And I believe action is going to be taken on that as a takeaway.
Yeah, Rich, a funny story that will tie to this. Years ago, I made a big vision statement with an organization. And I said, within 5 years, we're going to grow this $10 million company to $100 million. That was my vision statement. And so I put it out there. I made the bold statement. We're going to $100 million in the next 5 years. Let's go. And in my mind, I'm thinking everybody's going to be like totally fired up that we're going on this big vision. But this was like when we had, I don't know, let's call it 50, 60 employees maybe or so. But of the 50, 60 employees, there's probably 3 or 4 of us that were owners of the business. Everybody else was an employee of the business, right? Guess what inevitably happened? When
Mm.
salary reviews came around or investments into the business came around, everybody started acting like we were $100 million business. What do you mean I can't get a 5% raise? I thought we were going to be $100 million business. Oh,
Uh,
hey, I want to go hire these people. I thought we were going to be $100 million business. Hey, I want to invest in
yeah,
marketing. I thought we were going to be like, and it backfired in a lot of different ways. The vision was exciting, but it backfired because
interesting.
of the statement that I thought would connect with everybody in the organization. If I bring it back to you in your point, it depends on who the audience is. If you're talking to a bunch of partners that are part of the business, let's grow this business to $1 billion or whatever the number is, may be really motivating. They have shares in the business. They can do their personal wealth calculators. They can go, wow, this is really going to move the needle for me. But then you go to the franchisees, and the franchisees, when they go to their teams, right, that work in that franchise region, it may be about how many homes and homeowners we help serve, connects with
Right.
them. So I think you really got to hit people where they are and where their hearts are. And I think that's one thing that Jeff does really well. And he continues to talk about the way he builds teams really is first by bringing the right people on the boat that have a growth and learning mindset, but then truly understanding who they are, understanding how they tick, understanding their love language, understanding all those different components. By doing that and everybody understanding the language of the others, you can actually create a really good, well oiled machine. I really love that approach.
You know, you bringing that up, it's funny as though you knew where I was going to go next because it's a perfect handoff. Second thing that I got from Jeff that is like making me question everything is his statement around high performers love assessments.
Yep.
Now, I believe I'm a high performer. I don't say that in a bragging way or an arrogant way. I think I'm a high performer because of my results, tenure, so on and so forth. Man, I love assessments. I love to learn about myself. I love to look at the positives and negatives that an assessment is pulling out, particularly if it could be quick and insightful. And here's what's making me question everything. I know I love assessments. I never thought, wow, that's a high performer thing. High performers love assessments. My gap is I have held back from our organization at looking at other assessments outside of our primary assessment, which is the caliper profile.
Mm-hmm.
The caliper profile is accurate on 22 different preferences and attributes and how they're blended together. It's very sophisticated and it takes some working with to understand how to use it, but it's very in depth. And I've held back on introducing other assessments because I've thought, wow, we have so far that we could go on Caliper. Why would we go to something else and confuse the language of what we're talking about? Because then one person's talking about the Colby assessment, another person is talking DISC, and another person's talking Caliper. That's just going to create a bunch of confusion. Let's have common language. That's what's important. It's making me second guess that there has to be where we open up to the idea of other assessments that feed high performers. I've gotten a ton of stuff out of the Enneagram as an insight. I'm not going to name a bunch of them, but I do lean on what I've gotten out of other assessments outside of Caliper. And I have held that back from our organization. And again, there are just a couple of things in this conversation that are like making me second guess these big things that we've been up to.
Yeah. We can start, if I had to guess, 90% of entrepreneurs that are going to listen to us talk right this second do not do assessments at all in their organization.
No, yeah,
And by the way, there's a lot of organizations that we are a part of that we do not. I'm second thinking that just as you're
yeah.
talking. And it's not because we don't want to. Sometimes there's just cost. You haven't structured it, or whatever. You haven't really structured it. But the value of them, as Jeff spoke and as you speak, it's, oh wow, why am I not in this hiring process at a bare minimum using an assessment. But then there's also the 360 assessments that I've done several times that I loved getting feedback.
I was just going to ask you, I know you to be a high performer, and you're welcome to declare you are. I believe you are. Do you love assessments and different assessments, and learning about yourself and where you can lean on different strengths? And do you also love assessments?
Love might be a strong word. I've enjoyed receiving them, don't need them. I don't feel today I need an assessment because I want to readjust or I feel a need to readjust. Like I don't feel a need personally that I need this or else I don't know how to operate. I don't know how to operate today. I need some direction on how I should operate from that perspective. I
Hmm.
like getting them because it helps improve how I may operate, but I don't have if you put it in the classification of needs and wants, I don't feel a need, but I like them. Whereas I feel
Yeah.
like other people need the assessment more
Got
because
it.
that they really want to make sure they're operating exactly the way that they need to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yours and my perspective on assessments is slightly different. You're almost describing the use of an assessment to solve a problem where there's an existing gap. And I'm looking at assessments as if we could use assessments more often, it may avoid having the gap to begin with. It's interesting, this whole concept of waiting for there to be a gap to engage it versus engaging it right up front reminds me of a conversation with my father after my mom passed away in January last year. And it was March or so. And I said, You may want to see a therapist
Yep.
just with like work out some of your thoughts. She's your wife of 53 years. And he basically said, Look, I come from a different school. Like, you go to a therapist when you're broken, and I don't feel broken. And I'm like, Dad, it's not when you're broken. Like, you go to a therapist so you don't get broken. Like, you don't wait for the car to break down to put gas in it. You put gas in it so you don't break down. Ultimately, he ended up going to a therapist and it was helpful to him. And he's since disengaged with the therapist. And I'm not saying you're as down the road as my dad was, but I'm just drawing that parallel between, I bet a lot of entrepreneurs look at assessments as using them when things are broken versus using them so things don't break.
Yeah. I think it's a really good way to frame it. And that's not exactly what I meant, but I understand what you're saying. And what I mean
Yeah.
to say there is that I enjoy a 360. I'd love to do one this afternoon and just see, hey, how am I being received? But I also have this over assessment component of assessing how you and I should communicate with each other so I understand how you communicate versus me learning how I should communicate with you. So I think you can overdo it. Is more of my point. But there are some times
Yeah.
where maybe you feel you aren't getting the results you want, or people aren't experiencing you the way maybe you think you are, and you want to test that. There's other areas to really go down that road. So I guess I'll land with I like assessments. I don't feel they're always
Yeah.
necessary or they're always needed, but yes, I do love assessments, and thank you for calling me a high performer. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Another thing I got from him is if you and I were to talk and we said, Hey, John, you think it's important to find somebody with a good work ethic? Yeah, of course. But his take on a good work ethic was a little bit interesting. He was looking at it like, look for someone who's expressed a good work ethic from a young age. And I don't know HR wise exactly what type of questions you could get into to know, well, what was a family like when you were growing up? I'm pretty sure you may not be able to ask that. But people who grew up on a farm, people who grew up in a restaurant business, he said, like there are patterns because he's a master of looking at patterns.
Yeah,
There are these patterns of people who grew up in a family where work ethic was really necessary by the parents. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Of course, that's going to transfer to the kids who grew up in that family.
absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt. This is all about what behaviors have people displayed or examples of situations they've experienced. It all plays into all of us. There's no doubt that some of the history of my youth plays into who I am today, as it does for you and everybody listening to this. And so when you really get to the core of who somebody is, to learn more about them, it can really help in the process. And what I loved about what he said, he didn't finish the statement, but hire slow, fire fast. And there are a lot of dupes. As he said, he hired some psychopaths. I've hired some psychopaths. Believe me, I didn't take the process seriously enough. and failed. And I think that's the whole value of what he brought to the table is follow these patterns, go get the 11 steps that he articulates, use these assessment tools, learn. And even when people come to your organization, don't stop. Continue to learn more about who they are and how they are experience you or others, and build that team culture in that fashion.